a nice, uplifting gospel message for a Sunday morning. How do we make sense of a gospel passage where somebody is invited to a wedding feast only to be thrown out after being bound and tied? I don't know about you all, but if I get one of those invitations, I'm not going. It's all nice to make jokes about what the gospel has to say this morning, but it's very serious. What Jesus is talking about today in his parable is an invitation sent to all of us from God. We are all invited to the great banquet feast. And I'm not talking about the one that we have here on a Sunday morning. This is just the foretaste of the great banquet that we will all partake in when we enter into life eternal. But as we heard, God offers us the invitation. It's up to us to say whether or not we will attend. And then, even more so than attend, when the event actually takes place, will we show up? We heard this morning that there were a whole bunch of really well-intentioned people who responded to the wedding invitation and said, "Yup, I'm going to be there." But then the time comes and something more important happens. Work gets in the way. Or their farm gets in the way. And they choose work over feast. So then they don't show up. So let's figure out who else can I invite. I've got this party now. Just go out and find everybody there is and invite them in. And they show up. They arrive, they don their wedding robes, and they are ready for the feast. I mean, after all, if you're going to feed me, I'm going to come. If you are going to treat me to a wedding feast, and I'm in the street, I'm going to go. But, as the saying goes, there's always one. There's one person who doesn't don the wedding gown, the wedding robe. Now, at first you may think, well, not everybody's got a wedding robe hanging around their house. How am I going to find one to go to this function? Well, I liken it to those really fancy restaurants where a jacket is required. And if you don't have a jacket, they have this whole rack of jackets in all different sizes, and they just tell you put one on because you need to look the part if you're going to be in this restaurant. I don't know if they exist anymore, but they used to. Well, that's the way this was. The gowns were there. The robes were there for people to put on. But one chose not to. He chose to say no. And as a result, he was kicked out. The issue is, we're not talking about a wedding banquet here. We're talking about an invitation from God to each of us to accept the gift of salvation. The robe that those people coming to the wedding feast were putting on is they were donning their salvation. By saying yes to the invitation to God's feast, you are saying yes to your salvation. In a busy world, we can understand how some people may skip the wedding feast. Something else came up. My car was in the shop. I had to go to work. It is a fact of life that we are busy. But it is also a fact of life that we are given the gift of love and salvation by God. And it is that gift which we must continually say yes to. And we must understand that we are saying yes to the invitation without being able to say who else has been invited to this function. The gospel passage is very clear that the good and the bad were invited. So that means that the person sitting next to us at that banquet may be the person that we don't want at the feast. It may be the person that bullied you in school, the person that robbed your house. Could be your ex-wife, your in-laws, any number of people. But they are as welcome at the feast as we are. So the answer to the question is, yes, Lord, I will be there. But the question we have to wrestle with is whether or not we will be okay with who else is at the banquet. As you go through your week this week, as you get frustrated by somebody somewhere, think about the banquet and that person has also been invited. And that person may be the person that you're sharing a booth with. Because we have an invitation for everyone. And we don't get to choose who's going to join us. Whether we feel that we have that right or not. Amen.